Hello, my name is Lee Taylor, and I really like to knit, so much so that some of my friends call me the Knitwit. I hope you enjoyed today's video and possibly even learned something. So let's get started.
This week we're going to keep it simple. We've got a stash dive with the yellow yarn back here. We have project updates. We have some swatching to do. And I've got a bonus video on works in progress versus UFOs. So let's get started. Like I said, this week we're going to keep it nice and simple. To start this episode off, we're going to stash dive into my yellow yarn collection. So hopefully you will see some yarns that you love and may have an idea of a potential project for me to knit in the future with them. So let's take a look. Okay, to start off, we have Terra Fibers Sport Weight Yarn. 100 grams gives you 325 yards. It's 85% merino, 15% silk. The colorway is Daffodil. And this is actually a locally dyed yarn. It's within 10 miles of my house. I have not met the people who dyed it, but I definitely love the yarn. This yarn is special because this yarn is what gave me Sean. Sean come with this yarn as a special gift. So without this, I wouldn't have Sean. Next off, we have a yarn by Lily Sugar and Cream Solid and Denim is the brand name. It is a worsted weight yarn. 71 grams gives you 120 yards. It is all cotton and the color name is just simply yellow. It's kind of a buttery yellow in person, and it feels exactly like you would expect a little cotton, almost like twine, to feel kind of rough. Next we have Hobby Lobby brand I Love This Yarn. That's the name of it, I Love This Yarn. It is an Aran weight. 142 grams gives you 252 yards. It is 100% acrylic, and the color name is Banana. Just a simple little acrylic yarn. Last on our stash dive, we have Lion brand Basic Stitch Anti-Peeling Yarn. It's an Aran weight. 100 grams gives you 185 yards. Acrylic, and the colorway is Mustard. And that's coming up very shiny gold, and this is a much more muted, like not like a classic yellow mustard, but like a honey Dijon kind of mustard. Very soft, and it's got some shine to it, as you can see on there. And I really like this yarn. Now this isn't the whole thing, it's split up into two different yarn cakes. So that is our stash dive. This week, let's grab some knitting needles and some yarn as we look at two different techniques. One is the long tail cast on, and the other one is knitting with yarn held double. I use both of these pretty frequently, definitely the long tail cast on more than knitting with yarn held double. But in the overview, I will show you how this works up. This week in the Swatch Lab, we're going to be learning how to do the long tail cast on, as well as knitting with yarn held double. So I'm just going to use these plastic needles here that I've got. They're a US 8 or a 5mm. And I've got just some, it's extremely cheap, very coarse acrylic yarn. It actually, these needles and this yarn came in a kit. So we're simply going to take our yarn and we're going to make a slip knot. I just bring it over my finger and twist that over, and then grab the tail yarn and pull it up through that loop, like so. So now we have our slip knot. That goes on our knitting needle with the yarn, or the yarn tail, towards the front, like so. Yarn tail towards the front. Pull that snug, not tight, just snug. Then we're going to make a slingshot with our fingers. And the yarn tail is going to come to the front, so we're going to grab this yarn like this, and then we're going to use our thumb and finger, and we're going to spread that open so it looks like a diamond shape. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to come under this strand on our thumb, like so, okay, and around and over this strand. So it goes like this. I guess that would be under, like that, okay? That's our slip knot, that doesn't count. So we should have 2 strands on our needle right now. Now we're going to take our needle tip and come back out the way we went. So back through those 2 strands here, under and out, okay? So you got that little X. Now we're going to take our thumb out and come back under like this. And we're just going to use our thumb to just pull that snug. So let me do that again. Make our diamond, come under this yarn here on our thumb, okay? Swing around and grab this yarn right here on our finger, like so. Back through between the 2 strands on the thumb, like so. So you've got that little X. Take our thumb out and just pull that snug. Okay? Once more. Make our diamond, come under the strand with the thumb, swing around over the strand at our finger, and pick it back out through that loop. Take our thumb out, and let me show around here. So then we take our thumb out, and then we're just going to bring our thumb back under like we're going to make a diamond and use that to pull snug. Okay? So see, then we're in position to do again. And you just repeat that as many times as the pattern calls for to cast stitches. So each movement, complete movement, casts on 1 stitch, but it also works a row already. So you're actually getting 2 things done with a single action. So one side of our long tail cast on, if it'll focus in here, try that. There we go. You see that, the little bump side. The other side is a lot smoother. So you got the smooth side and then that bumpy side. So that is how you do the long tail cast on, and then you would just go through and knit as you would with any other knit stitches or purl stitches. In this section, we are going to knit yarn held double, which just means you knit with 2 strands of yarn. I'm using 2 separate colors, so it's easier to see, but it would work just fine with a single color. So this is how you could take and knit a thinner yarn as if it was a thicker yarn. So same needles, plastic, US 8, 5mm, and 2 Aran weight yarns. This one I believe is denim, and this one is burnt orange. So to begin with, we pull out our yarn tails. We'll pull out some yarn. Okay, and what I like to do is take these 2 tail ends and just make a knot, just so they are fully secured together. And they can't, then I know as I'm pulling, I'm always pulling as if it was 1 strand. So now, I pull out some yarn here. Now we're going to do the long tail cast on, which we've seen in the previous section. And we're going to knit this yarn held double. And one thing to note when you do this is you treat the 2 strands, those 2 separate loops, you're going to treat them as if there's only 1 yarn there. So we put it on our needle. Okay, cinch down. Make our slingshot. and do our long tail cast on. And again, you're going to just treat these 2 yarns as if they were one. And if you really wanted to, you could make sure that it always goes orange, blue, orange, blue, orange, blue across. That is definitely possible. Make sure we're orange and blue. I don't get too caught up in that. I just make sure that they're on there. So I'm just going to cast on some stitches here. Let's see here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll just knit with 10 stitches here. So there's 10 stitches, but because we're holding double, there's 20 strands. But again, we're not going to look at those as each individual yarns. We're going to treat it as if it's one yarn. So we're going to take our yarn tail, and I like to put it in my hand so I know that I'm not knitting with it. So I just kind of take it and grab it so it's out of the way, and then I've got the working yarn, which is attached to the yarn cakes. And I'm just going to knit, which I did an example of how to do this in last week's video, so I'm not really going to walk you through how to do that. I'm just going to show you how to knit with the 2 strands. So I just take my hand and wrap it around the yarn like that and throw it through my pinky like that. And that's how I tension my yarn. Like so. And then we're just going to knit as if there was only 1 strand there. And you just knit along. And like I said, this is how, if you've got, say, a sport weight yarn, and you hold 2 of these together like this, it would be the same as if you were knitting with a worsted weight yarn. If you've got a fingering and you hold 2 together, it's as if you have a DK. If you have 2 DKs together, it's an Aran. And if you have 2 worsted weight, it's a bulky. Now, of course, yarns are on a continuum, so it may be a little thinner or a little looser than other ones. But you just knit. That first row is always tight, so it's always going to give you a little bit of trouble. But as you go along, it will loosen up for you. See, that one's giving me fits. Okay. There we go. Now this is also tight because this size yarn, since I'm knitting double, is like a thicker yarn. And I have needles that are too small, but that makes it really dense fabric, and so that makes it more snug. So you would just keep doing that, just knitting right along. I'm going to zoom in here. And you would just keep knitting as you would regularly, but you just got 2 strands of yarn in your hand instead of 1, and you just knit like you would regular. And that is how you knit with yarn held double. So the February gnome of the month in the entry gnomes of the year is Gnelson Gnewman. The hat is pale orchid. The body and butt, I just call it the butt, is cardinal, linen, and then bone. Gnelson was nicknamed Cupid by friends for his matchmaking skills, although ironically he is a self-proclaimed lifelong bachelor. So that is the little gnome for February, Gnelson Gnewman. Here is the overview for Gnelson Gnewman. The color of the hat is pale orchid. The butt is cardinal. The beard is linen. And the nose is bone, just as it has been this entire time. I did not block this hat. I blocked the hat for the other one, which just means I heated it up so the stitches kind of relaxed. And I can't really tell a difference between the two, so I'm not going to fight trying to block it along with. So you can kind of see where I did decreases and it makes that spiral. I don't know if that's coming through very well. Again, I stuffed it with polyfill and filled it with 12 marbles. The marbles definitely are not necessary, but it is a nice little added bonus. But there is Gnelson Gnewman up close. It's time once more for an update on my 46 limit cardigan, and I made some good progress. I got to the underarm shaping. Let me see if I can back up and get the whole thing in one shot. There you go. So this is the back panel up to the underarm, and I'm making good progress with it. And once I get done with this project, then I will go on and knit the next gnome. So I'm going to knit a gnome, knit on another project to a stop and spot, knit a gnome, project to a stop and spot, or finished gnome, back and forth until I get caught up current with gnomes. So that way I don't get burnt out, and I don't want to knit another gnome come December or years to come, because I've really been enjoying knitting gnomes and I don't want to burn myself out on it. So that is the 46 limit. Like I said, I did make some progress, and I'll talk about what these stitch markers mean in the overhead, but I'm very happy with it. I'm very excited to get it and get it finished to wear in one of my upcoming videos. So that was the 46 limit cardigan overview. First off, I want to talk about this little tool right here. So this is a clicker, is what I call it. It's a row counter, or it's just a way of keeping count of things. You just click the silver button and it keeps count. I use it, of course, to keep count of rows, but you could use that like if you're counting customers coming in the building, if you're counting times you've seen a cat, if you're counting people wearing a red shirt, you just keep clicking that. Then if you need to reset it, you can't go back individual ones, you have to completely reset it. You turn this knob here and that moves all the numbers back around. So I have one that's silver, this one's blue, I have a red and a yellow, so that way each one's color coordinated, so I know which one goes with which project. This is a spare. I don't have a current project for it yet, but I will very soon. More on that to come. So here is the red one that I'm using for the limit. So as you can see, I have 126 rows, which you would divide that in half to get the number of garter stitch ridges. But here is my sweater. Do a very up close version. So what we have here, I'm going to stop and talk about the stitch markers first, since that's what's first in the screen. So the red stitch marker marks 20 ridges or 40 rows. It's actually purple. It's showing up pink, but it's actually purple. Marks where I did the bind off for the underarms, which I'll show you here in a bit, and those two rows, which makes one garter stitch ridge, has 180 stitches in it, so I'm using that to keep count of my overall stitches. This dark bronze, which is on the row directly beneath that, is where I stopped knitting straight for the back, and the next rows up means that I'm doing something different with the pattern. So here I bound off for the underarms, and normally I would have one up here when I got done with the bind offs to do the next section, but since I'm just knitting straight up, I only needed the one marker, and then of course the marker for the red stitches. So let me zoom out here and we'll take a look at this and see the underarms. Okay, so since I showed the overall thing in the overview, we'll just look at the more detailed things. So as you can see right over here, I bound off 6 stitches, which means you just close them off so you don't knit them anymore. So I bound off 6 stitches, and then I'm going to work up straight until I get to the very end of the shoulder, and then I'll bind off all the way across. So that would be for the right underarm. Here's just where I joined in new yarn. Now over here on this side, I have my underarm bind off. That would be for the left side, my working yarn, and then down here I have my yarn from where I added the other. Because since I'm working with 2 strands, I stopped 1 strand at that row, picked up the new one, worked across, and then I dropped the other strand and picked up the new one and worked across. So that is my limit sweater. I'm getting very close, and when I get done with this sweater, I will start up the gnome for March, because I'm trying to catch up. So I am very close. Like I said, I'm at March, so I just have March, April, and then I'm on May. So we'll get this done, knit a gnome, and then I will start on a new project for in between the gnomes. Next, I'll talk about my Mosaic Scarf pattern that I've been working on. The other night I realized that each of my gnomes has 2 colors, and it's worked, 2 colors that change. There's always 2, and then there's 2 new ones, so each gnome is 4 colors. And when you're knitting mosaic patterns, you use 2 colors, and you knit across with 1 stripe, and you knit some stitches, and you slip other stitches, and then you work back and forth. And then on the next one, you work with the other color back and forth, knitting some, slipping some. So you need 2 colors. Well, since each month there's 2 new colors on the yarn, on the gnomes, I decided that I would make a scarf with each of the 2 colors to make a year-long scarf. So I will have a year of high temperatures in the Afghan, a year of gnomes, and then I will knit a scarf that represents all the gnomes that I knit throughout this year. So it's a year of knitting projects for a year. So in the overhead, I will show you my scarf pattern, tentatively called Atari, A-T-A-R-E-E, due to copyright purposes. However, I'm thinking that's going to change, and I'll talk about that more in next week's video. As I mentioned in the overview, our bonus video this week is a mosaic scarf that I designed. So I'd like to walk you through the process of how I do that. So first off, what I do is I get me some graph paper, and let me fold this to where you can't see the next section here. There we go. I'll zoom in. And what I do is, as you can see, I mark with which one's the light color, which one's the dark color, and I just go through, and each square is its own stitch. Usually knits. Sometimes I do it in a stockinette where you knit across one side and you turn around and you purl back. And if you see these little sides here, these little dots indicate which color you work on the row, because mosaic you only work with 1 color at a time, and you just slip and skip the stitches you're not working on. So this is how the pattern started. As you can see, I've made some changes to how the pattern looks. So after I've got a general idea of what I want, and I've adjusted, made the little mistakes, then I will take and I will make it again with the adjustments. So as we're going through here, you can kind of make out some of the changes. Like here I had just 1 square with this, I had 2 right here because I wasn't sure what I was doing up, because I started at this corner and work across and up. Because when you're knitting, you start at this corner and work across and up. So
it makes sense to start here at this corner. So as I adjusted that, you know, I come up here and I do some more. So then I decided I'm going to take, now that I've got this one that I like, I'll start again and mark this. Well, as I was working across this, I figured out that I can use an Excel spreadsheet and do the exact same thing and just block out a block of color. So that is what I do. And now I will show you pictures, one of the inspiration that started this, and then the various rough drafts, and I will explain afterwards why I changed and what the differences are between, because they are kind of subtle. In rough draft number 1, I had the basic idea, but I still had some mistakes in it. You can't slip a color from the row below unless that color exists in that stitch from the row below. In rough draft number 2, I solved the color slipping issue. Now I needed to adjust the selvage edge. In rough draft number 3, I solved the color issue. I solved the selvage edge, and now it's ready to be swatched up and see how practical the pattern actually is. Once I've got my pattern sorted, now I have to swatch. And so I chose these two colors here, Kings Canyon and Golden Heather, I think is the name of this one. I can't remember. It's been a while and it's not even in my Ravelry. So I knit up the sample. This is all in garter stitch, which I normally don't like Mosaic done in garter stitch. It's just, you lose some of the stitch definition. Now, another reason why this is kind of tricky to see, although it's showing up pretty well on camera, is because these colors are so close together in color value. When you take a black and white picture of them, this is a very dark gray and this is a mostly dark gray. And so they're too close together, and so it makes it hard to see in color work. So I did the exact same pattern in stockinette and with a dark color and a light color, so that way you could actually see. And that brings us this. Now I have not blocked it yet, but you can see the difference between the two. And you know, this, where this is white here is orange here, so the white that would be for this one is the green for this one, so you don't really have that definite change. But I'm calling this pattern Atari, but I'm spelling it A-R-T-R-E-E, Atari, for copyright purposes. And that's probably going to change, but when I seen these right here, I think first of a bunny skull, and that felt a little too dark, but then I was like, oh, those looks like the little aliens on Space Invaders, and it just made me think of Atari. But there's my Mosaic pattern, and we'll take a look as I progress and see how this pattern changes. Let's take a moment to talk about some knitting terminology. First, we have UFOs, and second, we have WIPs. Now, UFO stands for unfinished object, and WIP stands for work in progress. So in my mind, a UFO is something that you're knitting on, but you're not knitting on it actively, as in it's been put to the side, it's in timeout, it's hibernating. You haven't worked on it in a few weeks to months to maybe even a couple of years. That would be a UFO. A WIP, a work in progress, is something that you're knitting on, but you're actively knitting on it. You've knit on it either every day or within the last couple of weeks. Maybe set aside for just a short time while you knit up a gift or something of that nature. So those are the two terms that I use when I'm talking about my projects, is UFOs and WIPs. As always, I thank you for watching the video.
And please let me know if there's anything in particular you would like to see featured in upcoming videos, or anything you'd like me to explain more in depth, as well as any projects you would like to see me start and possibly knit on the video. Thank you for watching.